My blanks have dried overnight and I'm ready to go ahead and square them to the tubes. For that, I'm going to be using this little jig. I really am a fan of this jig. I like to use a C-clamp and clamp mine to the slide for my disc sander table. And basically, I use a punch. This is a set of punches. You can get them relatively inexpensive. And you choose the size that best fits your tube and just twist this little nut here and lock it into the jig. You place the jig onto your table and basically you slide it back and forth, rotating the blank until the blank is sanded down perfectly perpendicular to your tube. With the blanks squared to the tubes, I'm just going to take this tiny little bottle brush and run it through the blanks, and you'll see the dust come out the other end. I like to get all of the particles out of the blanks, and take a look through there. You don't see any of the epoxy inside the blanks, and by clearing out the particles, that makes sure that I get a good fit. Anything that can get in the way of giving you a good fit with your bushing is bad. It can cause your pin to be off center and not turn. You'll have a fingernail on one side and it'll be below the bushing on the other. So be very careful and keep those tubes nice and clean. After getting my blanks square at the disc sander, I brought them over to the lathe, and you can see the line that denotes the center of my blank. I went ahead and applied my bushings. Now you'll notice this blank has a large bushing toward the center of the pin and a small one at the opposite end. That is the cap of the pin. This blank is the body, and it has the same size bushing at both ends. These bushings are actually larger than the cap bushing. I wanted to go ahead and insert them into the blanks so that there was no concern at turning time. Everything's ready to go. All I have to do is put them on the lathe and begin turning. Before I turn the pin, I want to put a new edge on my roughing gouge so it's good and sharp. I always start that process with a permanent marker, and I just color in the entire bevel on the tool. I take it over to my grinder. I lay it on the base, hold it against the wheel, and I adjust this up or down so that when I spin this with my thumb, I get a line all the way across the bevel from top to bottom. That lets me know I've hit the right angle. The rest of the process is just by hand. I'll take the tool, holding it against the base, move it into the wheel. I'll rotate it left, and then I'll rotate it back right again. And I'll take about 2 passes. This is a 200 grit CBN wheel, and it will give me a razor sharp edge on the end of this tool. I've got my first blank on the lathe. You can tell by the bushings they are different sizes, whereas the lower half of the pin uses the same size bushing on the front and the back of the blank. You'll notice I have this blank chucked up between centers. Now these are not traditional turn between center bushings. However, if you're very careful putting them on your lathe between your 60-degree dead and your 60-degree live center, you can use these bushings between centers. I've got the blank turned down flush with the bushings at both ends. I'm very happy with how it looks. I tried to just make a straight across cut here because we've got to come in and peel off a section of this blank for our trim ring. I was also trying to taper down toward the back end, but you'll notice right here I've got a nice knot that I did not see before I started turning. It's going to be beautiful. You can kind of see it reflect. It's got a lot of chatoyance. It's going to be beautiful when it's polished up, but it's a very hard area, and as you come off of that hard area and you hit the softer area, if you're not careful, you'll tend to start making the blank concave. So I decided to stop. We're going to use the sanding method of a blank behind the paper, and we're going to work this area to try to get a nice smooth taper and a nice transition. I've got an acrylic blank here, and you can see it's got a nice smooth surface. This is where it was against the bottom of the mold. The sides, you can kind of see the striations from the blade where the blank was cut. I have some 150 grit sandpaper, and I'm just going to come in and begin working this knot. And I'm going to try to take this knot down a little bit with the sandpaper and then sort of work a smooth transition from end to end so that my blank tapers nicely to the back of the pen. You're going to see as I start to sand some scratched up looking areas. Those are the high areas that's tool marks is essentially what that is. Eventually the entire blank will look scratchy. When the entire blank looks scratchy, that means I have smoothed the surface, and then we just need to shape it. I'll start off on camera so you can see how I'm going to use this blank to sand with, and then I'm going to turn the camera off and sand off camera because I really want to run the dust collector and keep this dust out of my lungs and my shop. She's starting to shape quite nicely. The surface is starting to feel smooth. I'm going to go ahead at this point. We're going to turn the camera off. I'm going to finish shaping this, and I'll come back in a minute and show you what it looks like. I've sanded out the little hump there. I've got a nice transition from the main body of the cap down to the end. What I want to do now is, I don't know how well you can see them on the camera, but there were scratches on the blank that go all the way around the blank. So I'm coming back with my sandpaper, and I'm just going to work the sandpaper back and forth. And the idea is to remove those scratches as best as I can before I go to the next grit of sandpaper. I want to work right up to the bushings. Notice my bushings are starting to change color. I do not care about the bushings. Bushings are not expensive. They are a consumable. What I do care about is either into my blank where it meets the bushings, because that's where it's going to meet the pin components. And I don't want an area there that's scratchy because it's just not going to take the wax and the polish real well, and it's not going to look good. Now this end of the pin is not as critical because, as we mentioned before, we're going to part a piece of it off. But the other end, I'll start working really well. I can see a few scratches there. I'll start working it really well, and we'll make sure that we have no scratches and a really nice transition for that cap. What I want to do now is just inspect the blank. I'm looking for any deep scratches. I see right there, I can see some scratching, and we want to make sure we take good care of that. Any scratches you leave on there, these are really deep scratches. You may get lucky, they may polish out, but chances are they won't, and you will see them when you put a finish on this blank. There's one right there. I'm just going to clean it up really good. There's one there. She's looking really good. All right, what I'm going to do now, I will shut the camera off because obviously I want to run the dust collector. I'm going to go ahead and run through the rest of my grits, 240, 320, 400, and then I'll come back, I'll show you the blank, and then we will start looking at cleaning the blank up and getting a finish on it. I've got the blank sanded down to 400 grit. It is extremely smooth from end to end. What we're going to do now is we need to measure 1 7/8 inches from this end of the blank, and we need to part the material off on this end of the blank with our parting tool. I've set my calipers up for 1 7/8 inches. I went ahead and brought my tool rest up, and I'm going to lay this pencil lead against that mark. Now we're ready to go ahead and part that material off. This is an 1/8 inch parting tool, and before I use it on my blank, I want to put a new edge on it. Now I'm going to use the same exact method that I used with the roughing gouge. I put a little permanent marker on the bottom of the parting tool. I lay it on the plate of my sharpening jig. We're going to rotate the wheel by hand, and we look for nice, even removal of the marker. At this point, we're ready to go ahead and sharpen this tool. Just a couple of quick touches and we've got a nice new edge on our tool. One of the things you want to be careful of when you're doing this is as you're taking this tool up to the grinding wheel, you want to make sure you hold it perfectly perpendicular to the wheel. You don't want the end of this tool to have an angle on it. You want it to have a nice flat grind on the end. I'm ready to go ahead and remove this little section of material from my blank. I'm hoping that with my tool freshly sharpened, I'll get a nice clean cut. I won't have any splintering or anything else that would make the end of this blank look bad. That went fairly smooth, and it looks like we've got us a nice clean cut. That little piece there should just come off. Let's go ahead and release the bushings and see what happens. Oh, that's perfect. And we've got a nice clean cut. I am really happy with that cut.